What is going on, everybody, and welcome back to Red Seat Radio. My name is Corbin. Earlier this week, the Red Sox announced unofficially, kind of officially, what their roster for the bullpen is going to look like come opening day. They made some pretty heavy cuts. They also added some pretty interesting guys. So we're going to go over all of the removals and additions in today's video. We're also going to talk about whether they were good ads or bad ads, and we're going to talk about what the closer situation is going to look like in 2022 for the Boston Red Sox, because it's definitely an interesting one. But before I get into that, do me a favor, make sure you guys have hit that subscribe button. We are only about 150 subscribers away. So if you're new here, we talk Red Sox stuff every day. Help us get to 1,000 subscribers by hitting that button. Also, make sure that you guys have hit that like button as well. Those just flat out help the video a ton and would mean a lot to me. Thank you all very much for clicking on this one. Let's get into it. I want to start with the removals, the notable absences from the Red Sox bullpen roster, with the first being Derek Holland. Now, Derek Holland was a guy that we picked up during the offseason that I think a lot of people kind of expected to be on this opening day roster. He had a very small sample size in spring training, only having pitched 2 innings, but he had a 0 ERA. His control was pretty good, and his stuff looked fairly good. So I'm kind of confused as to why he didn't make the roster, and we'll get into one of the reasons I think he didn't make the roster a little bit later on when we talk about additions, but I don't think this is the last we see of Derek Holland. I think Derek Holland will be up and down throughout the year. It's going to be interesting how that kind of looks during the season with the new limit on how many times a guy can get optioned during the season. So that'll definitely be a new twist to this Red Sox bullpen, who's probably going to need to bring up and send down guys because of the issue of depth that we have in the bullpen. The other guy I want to talk about is Darwinzon Hernandez. Now, at first, I was kind of shocked that he didn't make the Red Sox bullpen roster just because he's been a solid pitcher. He was a solid pitcher last year, but the problem with Hernandez is his control. He's always had control issues, and last year he still managed to be able to get guys out, but this year during spring training is kind of a different story. Now, again, it's a small sample size. Most of these guys are going to have small sample sizes. Spring training, these guys don't get a ton of appearances, but during his 2.1 innings, Hernandez had 11.57 ERA, and he had a lot of control issues during that time. It appears as though his control has gotten worse over this last year, and it kind of makes sense to start him in AAA to see if he can regain somewhat of a control that he had last year that will help the Red Sox in the back half of the season. That's where I see Hernandez making his way up into the majors, is that back half, and only if he can maintain his control throughout the first half of the minor league season. Let me know what your thoughts are on these removals from the Red Sox roster down below. Do you think they were good removals? Do you think they were bad? Let me know everything down below. Let's move on to some of the notable additions that I saw on this Red Sox bullpen roster. The most notable addition, in my opinion, to this Red Sox bullpen roster is Kutter Crawford. Now, Kutter Crawford has been a bright spot this spring training in an otherwise kind of shaky bullpen start for the Red Sox in spring training. Again, small sample size. He's had 3 appearances. He has a 2.25 ERA. And in my opinion, most notably, he's got an 18 strikeout per 9 going right now. That means he's missing a lot of bats. His control has looked really good this spring training, along with his movement on his pitches. I think this is not a surprise to anybody. I think Kutter Crawford was expected by everybody to make the opening day roster. Some people are saying that he might even be able to take over that closer role later in the season. I'm not entirely sure if that's going to be the case, but what I do know is I think Kutter Crawford is going to be a surprisingly good add to this bullpen. We've talked about how shaky the bullpen is in the past, and Kutter Crawford could genuinely be a very, very solid piece this year for the Red Sox. He looks good. He looks healthy. He's a young gun. I'm not going to say he's going to be Garrett Whitlock level because Whitlock was just insane last year, but I think he's going to come close. He's going to be that surprising young arm that is a bright spot in our bullpen for the entire year. Maybe even taking over that closer spot towards the end of the year. A lot of people are saying it'll be pretty early on. I don't think so. I think it'll be towards the end of the year, but we'll get more into that at the end of this video. The other player I want to talk about is Hansel Robles. It appears as though he's going to be on the opening day roster for the Red Sox in that bullpen. Now, the reason I bring him up is because this one kind of shocked me a little bit. The reason is not because of the way he plays or how well he's been doing in spring training. It's because he's had no spring training time at all. He was signed pretty late in this offseason, and he had a lot of issues with his visa getting into the U.S. to get to Red Sox spring training camp. So so he hasn't even thrown a single pitch for the Red Sox this spring training. Now, the reason I'm surprised is because I thought they were going to start him in AAA, let him get his bearings, let him get ready to go, and bring him up a couple months, even a month into the season. My guess was it was going to be Derek Holland on the roster, let Hansel Robles get ready, and then bring him up. My concern with Hansel Robles not getting enough time to perfect all of his mechanics and stuff like that is that last year he wasn't exactly a stable piece in the bullpen. He had a lot of great outings, sure, but there were also a lot of times where he came in and just blew a game. So I'm concerned that with the delay in his spring training, it's going to affect the way he pitches this year. Let me know all your thoughts on these additions down below. Do you like the addition of Cutter Crawford and Hansel Robles? Do you think one of them shouldn't be on there? Do you think there's another guy that should have been added that didn't? Let me know all your thoughts on that down below. The last thing I want to talk about is the closer situation for the Red Sox. It appears as though Matt Barnes is once again going to get the nod to be our closer in 2022. However, there was a statement by Alex Cora made late last week that stated that the Red Sox are concerned about Matt Barnes' velo numbers this spring training. His fastball right now is sitting at 92, 93 miles an hour. And if you're not following Red Sox stats on Twitter, I suggest you do. They have some great insight into all of these sort of proclamations that Cora makes and maybe some background information on a lot of stuff. But they came out with a tweet that showed what the league average was against a 92, 93 mile an hour fastball last year, and it's not great. Matt Barnes' 92, 93 mile an hour fastball is getting hit at a rate of a 287 batting average. Now, for a closer, that is not good news. You want your closer to be able to get guys out, strike them out, sit them down, and end the game. Sitting at 92, 93 will not do that. So it's definitely an area for concern, something to keep an eye on. One thing to note about that, though, is that Matt Barnes historically has always started spring training with a low velo and sort of ramped it up when he gets into the regular season, but this has been the lowest it's been so far. So definitely keeping an eye on that, but it appears as though he will be the closer going into opening day. Some other options that have been thrown around are Matt Strahm and Cutter Crawford, and out of those two, I really like Matt Strahm. He's been really good control-wise and velo-wise this spring training. He has not let up a single run in spring training yet, and he's got a strikeout rate of 15-9. Now again, this is a very low sample size, so I understand why we need to take everything with a grain of salt, but if he's missing bats, he's got the control and he's got the velo, I don't see why not he couldn't take over that closer role. If Matt Strahm were to take over the closer role, this would be such an underrated and appreciated pickup by Chaim Bloom. It would be insane. This guy had a huge ERA last year. He was injured for most of the year, and for him to come back and be pretty dominant in a closer role for the Red Sox would just prove to, I think, everyone, including myself, that Chaim Bloom knows exactly what he's doing all the time. Let me know your thoughts on the closer situation down below, and anything you want to talk about in this video, let me know down below. I love talking to you guys about these things. The bullpen could go a billion different ways with all the pieces that we have in there, so let me know what your thoughts are down below. As always, if you've made it to the end of this video, do me a favor, make sure you guys have hit that subscribe button. Like I said, we are only about 150 subscribers away from that magical 1,000 subscriber mark. Help us get there by hitting that subscribe button. Also, make sure that you guys have hit that like button as well, as these help out the videos a ton, like I said earlier. Thank you all very much for clicking on this one, and I will see you in the next one.